Alright, let's go ahead and get this started. I like to get my brisket and put it in a pan or a trash can or whatever, and I take it out like this. If your brisket smells a little musty, it's fine, because that's probably just because the brisket's aged. I'll take it out that way you don't spill juice all over the place. Alright, let's get trimming this thing up. First thing we do is take this hard glob of fat off. This fat doesn't cook, it's hard fat. It just adds cook time to your brisket, so there's no point of it being there, so just take it off. And that's another good thing about having a trash can out there. You just throw your pieces of fat in there. I pretty much do a super trim on the briskets. I don't really leave too much fat on top of it, because if you get your good brisket, it's got so much fat into it, the marbling, that it's not gonna be dry, especially since most competition cooks these days inject their briskets. I do. A lot of people I know do. Some people are purists and don't inject, but they're probably not the guys walking. Oh, and by the way, I did actually wash my hands before I started trimming, for you glove purists. Alright, well that's pretty much done. You don't really got to do too much to the meat side. But I do a super trim on my brisket. I take almost all the fat cap off, especially all the hard fat. You can always tell, you start seeing a little meat, you start not cutting as deep. People that you always keep a hone here, that way when your knife gets not really dull, but it doesn't have that razor finish on it, you can just touch it back up with your hone. And once we get done trimming this sucker up, we'll actually we'll square the edges up for the turn-in box, because it's a pain in the butt, especially when you got a brisket that's a little thin on the end like that, to cut it and the edges start shredding on you, and it looks really ugly in the box. And even though Texas competitions looks aren't everything, it's mostly about the flavor, you still want to eat with your eyes first, so I try to turn in the prettiest box I possibly can. Pretty much this point, when I get done with it, you'll pretty much be able to see all the meat, almost all the meat on it. I'll leave about 1/8 inch of fat on it. I'll leave a little bit on there because you want to have a little bit of rendered fat on top. Some of them judges like it, some don't. But if you turn in a brisket that's got 1 inch of fat on top of it, hell yeah, they're going to slam you on their judging. It's like finding the middle of the road. Now we're starting to get to the good stuff. And don't be too concerned if you take a little too much fat off and you see some meat there. It don't really matter that much, because when you wrap it up, everything's going to get tenderized about the same rate anyways. Your little thinner edges are going to crumble on you, but we're fixing to fix all that. I'll show you the trick when you crop the edges of the brisket before you put it in before you cook it. That way you don't have to worry about them falling apart on you. So we got pretty much almost all the point exposed here. You don't really turn a lot of point meat in. I'll show y'all. I take my slices for cook-off from about this area. I get a little bit of point on there, and then for the turn-in box, I take the slices and turn them around and put this part in the box facing the judge, because your first 3 slices are pretty much the only ones that get judged. They don't really eat the back slices. That's pretty much just for look and show. There we go. That's looking pretty good there. You find some hard fat, cut it out. This stuff doesn't render down, so you just take it all out. A real sharp knife definitely aids in this process. And that's pretty much the super trim. All this stuff, you want to cut all that off, because that'll burn. And if you do plan on turning in from this area, you don't want the meat to burn. Just like building an engine, whenever you have sharp edges, that stuff will burn. So you just take all that off. So now we got this nice uniform brisket. So I turned in fat side up. So what I'm gonna do is crop this brisket, how I'm gonna cook it and how I'm gonna slice it when I turn it in. That's about what it looks like when I put it on the pit. I always push it like that. And then you always want to crop your big end first, because you're going to take the most of the meat off the small side. So I'll square up the big end of the brisket first. You can save this stuff for beans. Works really good in pinto beans. So we're looking at a brisket approximately about 9.5 inches wide to fit in the box. That way when you put it in the box is actually a little smaller on the bottom. That way the brisket slices lay in there real nice when you cascade them out. We got this thin stuff here, so I'm gonna go ahead and crop a lot of this off. And you're wanting to get some of the point in your turn in. So I've been doing this so long, I know about 9.5 inches is, so. This right here is excellent to save and make hamburger meat out of, or throw it on the pit and have some burn ends for, while the stuff's cooking. Now the brisket kind of looks skimpy, but if you're doing cook-offs, it don't really matter what it looks like. It matters what you put in the box. And by the time we get done cooking this thing, it's going to turn out real good. Probably square this up a little bit too. Because when I get my briskets, when I cut them for turning, I don't actually turn them in with 100. I don't cut 100% against the grain. I cut across like this. That way you can get the brisket a little more tender, and when it's in the box, it doesn't fall apart. There's no rule that says you have to cut 100% against the grain. I'm probably cutting around 90 degrees against the grain, not 180. So, but that's what she looks like when we're done. And these little gray areas right here, you see, that's from the brisket being in the cryovac that's aged. If you don't cut those off, they may taste a little funky. Any fine steakhouse, when they age steaks, they pretty much turn black, and they cut all the crusty stuff off and just give you the aged meat. So that's how we do the competition trim. Finish this up a little bit right here. This is my favorite part to eat of the brisket. So basically when it's cooked, it's not really going to shrink too much. You're going to get probably 20 or 30% loss on this. But when it cooks up, it's going to just have that nice shape. And when you take your slices, it's just one clean pull across the whole brisket. You don't have your edges shredding from the little bit thin stuff. And we're gonna go ahead and put this on the pit, and we'll get back with you in a couple hours when it's finished. That's a wrap.